Hello and welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Chuck Benoit with The Nature of Things, where we're realigning God, government, and natural law so that we might realign and restore our American Republic. Please follow us on Facebook on this page and check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Now, if you'd like to take part in the narrative, simply post your comments. We'll be happy to address them when relevant to our discussion. And you can help us be a voice by liking and sharing this program. And please note as well that we'll be expanding our live stream to other venues very, very soon. In the American view of the Constitution, a course I facilitate occasionally, we speak of 5 positive effects of a biblical worldview on American political theory, economy, and culture. The first was that all colonial charters and later our Constitution acknowledged God and sought to enforce His standards, providing a unique balance between liberty and governmental stability. Yet only our Constitution actually separated God and government, with Blackstone's commentary citing natural law, not denominational distinctions, as the bridge between the two. The opposite of liberty and stability would be oppression and violence. And please note that in today's society, there are those who destroy liberty and with violence and create oppression by massive protests, bringing about the destruction of life and property. If any of you are interested in taking our course, The American View of the Constitution, let me know in the comments or private message me. I would hope to start something in late August if there's enough interest, I hope to hear from you then. So with that, let's welcome our guest today, Clermont City Councilman Tod Howard. Tod, how are you doing this morning?
Fantastic. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. Clermont, choice of champions, the training destination for athletes. What's going on with that? What's that all about? It's been around for a little while now, hasn't it?
It has. So we used to be Gym of the Hills, and back when, around 2010, we were challenged to go back and look and see what we wanted to be when we grew up, because we were still pretty small back then. And so as they reimagined and did the master plan and had a lot of meetings with the community, we figured out that we had a lot of people here who are ex-Olympic athletes and champions from all over. And so that was how they decided they were going to rebrand us, was Choice of Champions. And, I still have an affinity for Gym of the Hills, but Choice of Champions works as well.
There you go. I'd like to bring in our good friend, my good friend, and I'm sure yours, Mike Levine. How you doing this morning, Mike?
I'm doing great. This is such an interesting subject, and I hate to be controversial right out of the box, but we scraped off the hills and sold the dirt to the DOT, okay? So Gym of the Hills just doesn't fly anymore, Todd.
So it's Gym of the rolling street lights, but yes, they did. Yeah. It used to be so.
Gym of the place where there were once hills.
It is. They are definitely gone.
Yeah.
All right, Chuck. There you go. I just had to open that with a big boom, right?
Well, I'll just say that I have a friend up in the villages. When he comes down to visit, he says, "Boy, I keep forgetting that there are hills in Florida." So there's something left for those who are in a little more flatter areas there. So, well, let's jump into things. I heard the other day that you guys have reduced the millage rate here in Clermont 2 years in a row. How does that work?
Well, this will be the second year in a row. And, a few years ago they raised it. And, that's kind of what got me back into city politics, was when they started doing that. And they just didn't give us a really solid reason. And the numbers didn't make sense, and so that's how I kind of started rolling back into this. And then once I got elected, it was an absolute for me. And luckily, the state, love it or hate it, they've got a rule in there that in order to keep that millage high like it was, you have to have a supermajority. And so Chandra and I were, a Democrat of all people, were able to vote against it and force those other three members to lower it. So, it was a good win. This year is going to be a little different. I think we're going to be able to lower it by about 1 point or about 0.15. And so hopefully we get more buy-in this year, though.
Super. Mike?
Todd, I want you to differentiate between the millage rate and the rollback rate. Would you talk about that?
Sure. So the rollback rate is just a number within the millage rate. And so if we go to the rollback rate, what it does is it keeps the tax dollars the same as they were last year. And so it's, one is talking about actual tax dollars and one is talking about the rate. And so we did not get to, I proposed the rollback rate last year, but I couldn't get 3 votes on that. So that's how we ended up getting to a little higher than the rollback rate. I think the rollback rate was 4.6 and we got to 4.88.
So is that something that's important, or, just a little bit about your opinion? Is it achievable? So basically what you're saying is that each property owner who's paying taxes is paying more tax.
Absolutely, they are. And the thing with that is that in some years it is achievable to get to the rollback rate, and in some years it's not. You have increases in cost, you have increases in property values. If the property values increase enough, well, then you can get to the rollback rate. So it's a little balance. There's a little scale in there. But ultimately, people expect services too. So you've got to find that balance where you give them the services that they need, but we're doing it in such a manner that is the best financially. And sometimes you just have to dig deep and figure that out and find different ways to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a complicated, it's so interesting too, when you get into fiscal accountability, and I know that you and Rick Van Wagner and some others, really did a deep dive into the budget and, discovered quite a bit of cost savings there. And that's awesome, right? I mean, because again, the city's budget, what's the budget for the city of Clermont, Todd?
Total budget's about 120 million.
120 million, right? So obviously there's a lot of transactions going on in there. For me personally, I like a zero-based budget where you rebuild the thing every year and you get rid of the things you don't need and buy some things that you didn't buy last year because you do need, but there's a lot of transactions going on. So I understand the complexity of getting through that. But let's start a little bit, and forgive me for bringing up things that we haven't necessarily talked about, but I know that you're, so on top of your game that this is not going to throw you off. So, the homesteaded properties are capped, right, with like a 3%, a 3% cap on the increase on the taxable value. So can you talk a little bit about the mix between commercial properties and the way that works? And then we have, again, I've been doing real estate in the Four Corners area for 30 years. So we have down in the south part of the county, there's a pretty high percentage of people who own properties there and don't live there. So they're not protected by the homestead tax exemption. So as we look at it, because ideally, and the question really becomes, does growth pay for itself? And I would say to you that when people's homesteaded properties taxes go up, which means you can't get the millage rate down to the rollback rate, I'd just like you to talk a little bit about the mix, and then we can get into some of the planning and stuff like that to see how we can achieve getting more of the tax burden off of the homeowner, the homesteaded properties, and onto commercial and investment property owners. Todd?
And that's a great, a lot of people don't realize that nuance is that business owners pay large amounts of taxes. Through the Save Our Homes, you're absolutely correct that it's a 3% cap. But businesses, I believe they're capped at 10%. And so with that cap there, it rises a lot more, and so it protects them when we have these big these big years where in the past we've seen 15, 18% increases in property values, especially down here in South Lake. So it protects them in those years. But this year we're going to see an 8% increase. So, it's diving back a little bit. But that's super important to get into bringing in and focusing on economic development rather than building homes, because you're absolutely right. Residential is, and I hate to put it this way, it's a loser. I mean, it from a tax standpoint, you go backwards because you have to supply fire and police and water and all of this stuff to these individual homes. When somebody builds a big industrial complex, how many times is fire going to go out there? Besides,
Right.
same with police. You just don't have, they're not using the resources like residentials do. And so by focusing on getting that economic development, finding those businesses who are going to come in here, people don't realize that when you come in with say a $40 million investment into a business, that's about $700,000 just in property taxes a year.
Well, let's see if we can get Chuck involved in this a little bit. Let's get Chuck to kind of weigh in on and see what he has to say about it.
Yeah, well, it's hard to keep up with you guys. You really both know so much about this, and I'm not in the city of Clermont. Haven't had the need to get too involved in all of that. I could talk a little bit about what's happening between me and Orange County next door, who seems to be a little bit of a pest. But you got into the business side of things. I noted a little while back hearing you talking about lowering the current concern between the city and businesses, cutting red tape and things like that. Can you expound on that aspect of the city council?
Sure. And this is one of the ways that we're able to actually lower the millage rate is by bringing in additional business, making it easier for businesses to come in. When a business has to go and spend money and time and effort on a conditional use permit or on, one of these programs that the government's put in to basically control what a business is going to do with their land, it makes it more difficult, makes it more expensive. And it's not just the cost of the CUP, it's the cost to get to the hearing of the CUP. So they have to have special plans drawn up, engineering. There's a big step to go from point A to point B. And so we've tried to remove that. We changed the size of businesses when they have to come before the council. And so we raised that up to 6,000 square feet. So now if you're under 6,000 square feet, you can do whatever you want with your business. If you're above that, then you do have to come in for a CUP. But it's trying to right size and allow our business owners to expand. We did a program where we changed the parking rules so that businesses could go up, and trying to bring in retail and trying to bring in professionals, doctors, lawyers, that kind of stuff. So we're really just trying to reach around and bring those businesses in.
Joe.
Yeah. So, another thing that you threw out, another idea or comment that you made, I heard you make earlier recently, is the whole idea of reimagining the overall vision of Clermont. I guess that is a pretty broad topic, and I'm sure we've kind of hit on a lot of that in the few things that we've discussed. But give us your assessment of what that means, reimagining the vision of Clermont. For instance, my wife and I struggle to get Clermont into our weekend ventures. We seem to struggle to find that as the place we want to go. So I don't mean to, I'm just saying it seems like it could be a really, really wonderful little town.
That's what we're working towards. Is some of Clermont is very old. Our downtown is extremely old. I mean, it was when Clermont was designed, the downtown across all the way across 50, so between the two lakes was all a planned development. And, unfortunately, they put 50 between us. And so that kind of messes that old development up. But we're looking at downtown saying, how can we make downtown more walkable, bikeable, friendly, and, kind of move the cars out to the edges and bring in businesses that people want to see. One of the things that we hear a lot is, I don't want any more chain restaurants. I don't want chain businesses. We want local mom and pops. And what we're doing downtown drives that home, and it brings in those local businesses. And by creating an environment where, like you, Chuck, want to come up here and spend your hard-earned dollars, well, that's what we're trying to accomplish. But it's a process, and we've got to look at those areas in Clermont and figure out what we want them to look like when they get redone. So we know that eventually between Highway 27 and 12th, so that Highway 50 stretch is going to have to be redone. They're going to have to expand the road because right now it's 4-lane and it's going to need to be 6. And I don't, we have to have those discussions with people who are stakeholders and say, what do you want this to look like? Because it's all going to get redeveloped. And, Mike being in real estate probably has some strong thoughts on that.
It's interesting because I'm in downtown Mount Dora, Todd. And, I hear that all the time. We want to be walkable, bikeable, etc. But, in downtown Mount Dora, people really don't want to walk, Todd. Can you believe that? I mean, it's true. People don't want to walk. They want to park their car out front, get out, take 15 steps, and be into the store. And that's just, again, Shire McGuire was on with us our last video, and she's telling us that the lowest obesity rate of any county in the state of Florida is 50%. People don't want to walk. So all our planners are saying walkable, bikeable, and all that, which is great. It feels good and everything. The citizens don't want to walk, right? So it's just an interesting part of that whole component, and I fully get it. And I'm in downtown Mount Dora, and again, I'm from the Four Corners area, so I'm very familiar with Clermont. I've been involved in a lot of that stuff over the years with the Board of County Commissioners and stuff. But we have to be realistic about this. And another thing, just from my perspective, is that yes, the age of these buildings is really important because these buildings, they're dysfunctional. Like, for example, I was in the hotel and restaurant business for a long time. And when I look at these older buildings, I can't find a building I'd be willing to do business in. I mean, keeping your restaurant clean is a big deal. And if these buildings aren't cleanable, which means you can put water on the floor, it's really hard. So I won't say any more about it, but I just want to keep in mind, you got to take a look at the actual demographic and say, do people really want walkable cities? And I'll toss it back over to Chuck, who can then determine where to go with all this.
Well, I just thought I'd chime in because, I agree and I disagree. I'm from upstate New York. When I say upstate New York, I don't mean what New York City calls upstate. New York City says upstate is anything north of the city. I'm from an area that's what they call it's the capital region, the capital of Albany. We're surrounded by the Catskills below us, the Berkshires to the east of us, the Adirondacks to the north of us, and if I think of the other range to the west of us, I'll let you know. So we are just... It's a beautiful, beautiful community, and two major communities that I would say are similar to Clermont would be Saratoga Springs. Everybody's heard of the Saratoga racetrack. It's very similar to Clermont in the sense that we have a downtown area just full of restaurants, mostly high-end restaurants for you would expect in the racetrack area of Saratoga Springs, but also plenty of other types of restaurants and shops, really nice, some high-end, some medium-end, a little bit of you've got some of the, like the LL Beans and things like that are, not necessarily onesie type shops. And people are walking all the time. But they do want to be able to comfortably park before they get walking. And the other thing about Saratoga especially is we have a performing arts center. Now the good news about that is they have their own parking lot, so that's good. And then the other area is Glens Falls. Now Glens Falls is a flat out tourist town, I have to admit, but you see people walking all the time. So I'm not confident that nobody's willing to walk, but I think they want to have some nice places to walk to.
Makes sense.
So
let me just jump in and just I didn't mean to get this thing off into that direction. We really want to focus on Clermont and what's going on. And Tod is very important. Tod's running for re-election to that council seat, and I do believe that Tod brings a lot of nuance to this race. And if his opponents do not see this the way he sees it, and I think Chuck and our views are more aligned with Tod's views than the opposition. So let's kind of get back onto that. Let's go back to the original topic. Go ahead, Tod.
Yeah, one of the things but you're right in one of the things, and this is important, this is part of what I'm running to accomplish, is parking walkable, bikeable. Well, right now we're looking at where we're going to put our parking garage. We just had a meeting about that on Tuesday, and luckily we found consensus, and this parking garage is going to be dropped right in the center of the walkable area. So, that is the nice part, is that you'll be able to drive right up, park in the garage, and then you're right there within a short walking distance of all of the businesses. And that's where we're doing a great job of being able to plan that and to figure out how to get those folks to where they don't have to walk great distances, but they can walk a little bit, so they can walk and shop, kind of like you would in an outdoor mall. And
got it.
Indoor
I have another
malls
question for you.
But
So Tod, is there any interest at all by hotel operators to put a small 100-room economy hotel? It of course provides their own parking, and then you'd have to get into the height restrictions and all that kind of stuff. Because that tourism really helps small businesses in the downtown area drive revenues, restaurants, gift, retail, all that. Is there any interest in that at all?
That's a great question. We actually do have a owner downtown who is ready to start into that hotel world. Now, it's not going to be an economy, it's going to be more of a higher end, but
Perfect.
yes, so they're going to put in a boutique hotel, and it's going to take up a pretty good chunk of the area, and it's just off of 8th Street, but it's, they're going to build it up on top of the existing businesses, and so it's a great option. And then they want to activate the rooftop, so they'll actually have restaurant dining upstairs, so you can look out. They'll have a beautiful boutique hotel, but that's the thing that you have to do, is get out of their way and let them build that. Say, hey, we want you to be here. Let's get these parking regulations out of your way so that you can develop this, and that's what we're doing. And so that's why it's so important to set the stage now, to allow these guys who are going to bring hundreds of millions of dollars in investments in our downtown, and within the next, and I really expect it within the next 5 years, that it literally would be hundreds of millions of dollars invested into our central business district, and it's just fantastic.
That's going to be a shot in the arm for downtown Clermont. So just for the record, Tod, I'm in favor of it. And now I'd like to just go back to Chuck so he can get us on to the next topic.
There you go.
Well, we are screaming through our topics for today, and this last one, reimagining the overall vision of Clermont, I think has opened up my eyes to some very, very interesting to a very interesting future for Clermont and the surrounding areas. We could, I guess, possibly talk about traffic.
Ooh. The T word.
Traffic. Traffic's going to be a rough one. So for Clermont, we own 105 miles of roadway. throughout Clermont, and we're actually doing okay. We just did some micro resurfacing. We're getting ready to redo Lake Shore. We've got to figure out plans on East Avenue. So there's 3 or 4 roads that we know that we have to invest money in, but we're not behind like the county. And bringing up the county and roads, that's where the problem lies, is that, I don't know if you guys did you hear about that $710 million shortfall that the county's having on roadways?
Tell us about it.
Yeah.
So there's an estimate of about $710 million. Well, it turns out that estimate is 10 years old. So how much is it now? So we're looking at $1 billion to $1.5 billion that the county is behind on roadways. And, this is what's leading to a lot of the gridlock, especially on Hartwood Marsh. And not only do they do that, but they keep approving development. So they just approved another 650 home development on Hartwood Marsh, and kind of dropped it in our laps. And so the traffic is just unrelenting, and unfortunately, it really is in large part a county issue. And until they figure out their funds, and do what they need to do, take care of their responsibilities, we're caught in the middle.
So what do they say about that, Todd? How do they? I know you talked to them about it. So tell me, what is their response to that?
Their response is the money's not there, and you're on the list. Well, we've been on the list for years, and the residents are upset. When it takes you 45 minutes to go a half a mile, to get out of your neighborhood and get down that road, get down Hartwood Marsh to Highway 27, 45 minutes to go a half a mile is absolutely ridiculous. And, I don't know that there's a great answer. Unfortunately, the county has just not done a good job, and I'm not going to point fingers because I don't know why they're at that point. That's, I'm focused on Clermont, but yeah, I mean, right now they're talking about raising gas taxes, and, you see these things where they're like, oh, well, we want to see what services overlap. They're trying to figure out how to get the cities to take care of the county's responsibilities. Is what's going on.
Todd, let me just say something that I think is really important on this subject. And, I'm the same. I'm like you, Todd. I don't like pointing fingers at people. But the fact of the matter is when you have a problem, it's because somebody didn't do their job. And the only way to solve the problem is to go back and see, because, typically they consistently don't do their job. So we had the same problem. You're a school board guy, so you understand the ditch that the Lake County School District was in before you and Bill Mathias and other people solved the fiscal problem, right? So, and I hate it. I do. I hate it. Nobody likes to create contention among our neighbors who happen to be leaders. But the fact of the matter is, these problems are created by people failing to fulfill their responsibilities. Can you agree or not?
100%. And that's.
Do you mind if I jump in real quick, because we're kind of coming up to the end of our time? And Todd, can we keep you over for another shot here? Can we do it? Super. Well, we will start our next little live stream with Tod Howard talking about the school district and a few other different things, and I guess the county, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to thank Todd for being willing to come back again to continue our discussion on Clermont and other things. Mike, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I'm just so glad to have Todd with us today. He's just an amazing resource, and I'll tell you something. We're so grateful, to have Todd with us, because he doesn't have to do this. Long story short, so I'm looking forward to getting into some other issues with him on the next episode.
Super. Thank you again, Todd. We'll see you again soon. So with that, we'll see you all next time. And meanwhile, God bless you, God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.